The story begins in Steve Rogers' apartment right as he wakes up. He was now old, and the effects of the super soldier serum had worn off. He was just a regular man now. His wife, Rosa, brings him coffee in bed and is acting extra nice today, hoping that maybe Steve would forget that today is August 13th. But Steve didn't forget. It's all he could think of. He goes outside and walks among the crowded streets, while some people still recognize him after all this time. He meets his old friend Luke Cage, who greets him and says they need to hurry because Matt was waiting for them in the park. Luke Cage used to be indestructible, but now his impenetrable skin was causing him more trouble, and he was barely able to move and needed a prosthesis to live his life normally. The three of them talk about the government and how corrupt it has become over the past few years, with daily curfews, even though Hydra wasn't a threat anymore. Later at home, Steve cooks a delicious dinner for his wife while she watches a documentary on TV. The documentary tries to paint the Red Skull in a good light, saying that he actually tried to take down Hitler and was trying to do the right thing. But this only angers Steve, who slams his fist against the table. After Steve Rogers retired, a new team of Avengers was created with a new Captain America, a new Thor, and a new Iron Man, who were secretly led by James Stark, the son of Tony Stark. James was being helped by Kyle Jarvis, who took care of him ever since he was a little boy, right after his parents were killed. The next day, Steve Rogers and James Stark were both invited to give an interview and talk about the Red Skull. Steve was appalled by the new documentary that was airing on TV and says that the Red Skull was a monster, but James contradicts him, saying that he and his father painted the world as black and white, heroes and villains, but this only brought them H-Day. H-Day was a national tragedy that happened in Boston when many people lost their lives, including many of the heroes. The Avengers were fighting Ultron, who was able to take control of the Hulk and forced him to level almost an entire city. Rogers leaves the interview after a heated debate with James, but he can't help but relive the events from that awful day. When he and the other heroes arrived in Boston, the city was partially destroyed, and the devastation was catastrophic. They find Spider-Man barely alive, who tells them that he managed to save his aunt and wants the Avengers to look after her after he dies. But Rogers got lost in his thoughts and completely lost track of time. Some officers tell him to go home because it was past curfew. While walking back to his home, he sees a group of teenagers being harassed by the police and wants to help them. But the super serum had worn off a long time ago, and he was just an old man now. He still managed to take a few of the officers down, but eventually, they started hitting him with batons, and he was overpowered to the ground. Luckily, he was rescued by a group of vigilantes who attacked the police officers but knocked him out cold as well. James Stark visits the Raft, a highly secured prison and research facility where they were doing all kinds of experiments and testing out new technologies. He enters a secret room where they were keeping locked inside a giant tank, the only thing that was left alive of Tony Stark, his head. Steve was taken inside an underground lair, but he had to be blindfolded, according to protocol. Luke Cage greets him, saying he is sorry for the harsh treatment, but they have to protect themselves. Cage organized a resistance to fight against the corrupt government and call themselves the Defenders. He says the government and S.H.I.E.L.D. are hiding the truth from people and that the new Avengers are attacking other countries overseas. He wants Rogers to be a part of the resistance and lead the fight, offering him the super soldier serum and a chance at becoming Captain America once again. Cage doesn't want Rogers to just be a simple soldier. He wants him to be the face of the resistance and gather support from the public. Steve accepts, but before starting the process, he calls his wife Rosa and tells her he won't return home for a few days because there is something he needs to do. Steve Rogers stepped inside the machine, and once again, like many years ago, he stepped out as Captain America and says he's going to assemble the Avengers once again. With the super soldier serum flowing through his veins, Captain America didn't waste any time and attacked 2 police officers who harassed a homeless person for sleeping on the streets. He quickly dealt with the 2 officers and offered to help the old man, saying that everything was going to be okay now. The Defenders discussed inside the lair the first plan of attack against the government. They wanted to broadcast live. The government had complete control over what everyone saw, which meant almost 0 live events that could be disrupted. The Defenders had created a video with essentially the greatest hits of the atrocities committed by the government in the last few years, and wanted to broadcast it to the world during New Year's Eve in Times Square. But this wouldn't be easy, because the remote news stations would be heavily guarded. America had been committing atrocities across the globe and using the Avengers to achieve their goals. Someone had to put a stop to it. The Defenders brought Rosa to the lair, but she wasn't happy to see Steve. She was angry at him for becoming Captain America once again and slapped him, saying he dragged her into this fight without her permission and without even talking to her first. James and Jarvis visited the United States President to talk about the Defenders and Captain America. James wanted to send the Thunderbolts to deal with them, but the President opposed this decision. Jarvis threatened the President and said he shouldn't bother calling for help because the Secret Service worked for them and that he shouldn't forget who helped him get elected in the first place. Steve Rogers began his quest of assembling the Avengers once again and visited Ms. Marvel. He wanted her help in taking down the government, but she refused, saying she had a family now with 2 kids and couldn't risk putting them in danger. During the New Year's event, the streets were overrun with people celebrating and cheering the end of yet another year, but not everyone was celebrating. The defenders were preparing to launch their attack. 2 people snuck inside the remote news stations and tapped into the newsfeed, but they were spotted by the police. Captain America sprang into action and jumped to their rescue, easily dealing with the officers one by one. But someone was watching them from far away. The Thunderbolts were called to secure the area and shot 1 civilian by mistake. Bullseye was getting ready to shoot a second time and had her mark on the captain, but she didn't want to kill him and shot the device that was supposed to broadcast the video. Seeing no other solution, the captain took one microphone and decided to do this live. He started talking to everyone in Times Square and told them the truth, that the government had stolen their freedom. The Watcher Act wasn't there to protect them or their privacy. It was created to protect the government, so that the public didn't see all the horrific crimes they were able to do all these years. But the speech was cut short when more soldiers were deployed to deal with the resistance. Captain America and the defenders were forced to retreat and escape on their bikes. James told Jarvis that he had made some upgrades to the Iron Man suits, and pretty soon he would have many of them ready for the army, but Jarvis didn't want the army to use these suits. He wanted James to become Iron Man, saying it was his destiny. Jarvis was hiding a dark secret. He was actually the Red Skull in disguise, pretending to be Jarvis and mentoring James to achieve his own goals. After H-Day, the Red Skull was searching through the rubble and found Ultron's head that was still intact. He downloaded his program inside a locked computer and used him to help James create better technologies, and in return, Skull promised to release Ultron from his prison. The captain was disappointed when he found out that his big speech didn't have the impact he was hoping for. Cage smacked him over the head and said they weren't doing this to be liked by people. They were doing this because it's the right thing, and bad people are doing bad things. They recently just found out that Tony Stark was still alive and being kept inside the Raft, the highly secure prison surrounded by water. Rogers talks to Tyler, one of the people in charge of communications, and asks him if he managed to send out the signal. The signal was a very old distress call that the captain hopes would reach an old friend. He wants to go to the Raft and break out Tony Stark, but the prison is in the middle of the East River, and he needs a specialist who can override the security. Inside the prison, James was talking to his father, saying he made an armor for himself. He takes pride in the fact that he made the suit all by himself, without his father's help, and unlike his father and mother who were just fighting bad guys, he is actually saving the world and keeping it safe. Captain America and Tyler fly towards the prison using an old airplane from the original Avengers. The plane was designed and built by Tony, and even though it was now several decades old, the technology he used to build it was ahead of its time. They arrive on the island undetected and park the airplane on the side of the prison, praying that the rain was enough to help them blend in. Tyler gets to work and opens the doors, but the captain enters alone, saying it's too dangerous to take him along. This place used to be a high-security prison for those who let their powers corrupt them, for the villains they used to put away time and time again. But now, in a world without heroes, where the government executes its villains, this place was a monstrous research facility. Cap was disgusted and wanted to do something about it, but he was on a mission and needed to stay on track. Freeing Tony was the main objective. He knocks out one of the scientists working there and steals his access card, which grants him access to a highly secure room. Inside, he finds the severed head of Tony Stark kept inside a giant tank that was keeping him alive. He vows to take him out, but doesn't know what to do next, remarking that he probably should have brought Tyler with him. But he wasn't alone. Someone else was hiding in the ceiling waiting for him to show up. Bullseye was a member of the Thunderbolts and working for the US government, but she had the chance at killing the captain once before and hesitated. James Stark also enters the room, saying he came to have a tech chat with the old man, not with an actual old man. Rogers says he is going to take his father from this place, and what he is doing isn't right. Throwing people in prison just because they dared to question the government isn't right. James was pissed and said he was calling the Avengers to take him down, but that's when Bullseye heard enough and shot him in the shoulder with an arrow. She just put an arrow in the richest man in the world, and the captain asks her why she is helping him, but she had no answer. Rogers takes Tony's head from inside the tank and wants to leave, but James sounded the alarm. Bullseye shoots him again, this time in the other shoulder, saying that she memorized the layout of this place and asked the captain to follow her. The moment they open the doors, 2 soldiers jump them, but Bullseye quickly deals with them, and the 2 continue their escape. On their way out, they pass one of the rooms, and the captain sees something inside that belongs to him. His shield was being kept here, and he immediately grabs it, using it to deal with another wave of soldiers. However, James equipped his armor and was waiting for them outside, saying they are definitely coming with him, dead or alive. Tyler shoots him from behind using the airplane, but the attack did nothing to damage the suit, and James retaliates by crashing down the plane. The captain rushes towards the plane and uses his shield to break the window, and then grabs Tyler and pulls him outside. Steve says that nobody is going to die today, not while Captain America lives, and he kept that promise. He saves Tyler from the burning plane, leaving James in shock, who complimented his moves. James started flying towards the sky at incredible speed, prompting Bullseye to say that he was running away, but the captain knew better and tells her to run away, moments before James dropped from the sky, destroying part of the outdoor ramp and causing a massive crater. The impact was so great that part of the island began to collapse on itself, but the captain and Bullseye still tried to save the soldiers. James says this is ridiculous, the past trying to fight the future, but the captain says he is wrong, he is fighting for the future. The two of them began to fight, but James's armor was very powerful, and he even wondered why he hesitated to use it for so long. The captain begged James to save the soldiers that were about to drown, but he didn't care, saying that people die anyway and he only cared about his father's head. James claims it only takes a few hard measures put in place, a few examples made, and a few dreamers put to sleep to achieve his goals of controlling people. The captain asked him what gives him the right to make these decisions. His money, his father's brilliant mind? But James threw his father's head into the water, claiming he doesn't need him anymore. He doesn't need anyone. Rogers gets up and attacks James, saying that everyone needs help, and in that moment, Miss Marvel arrives and saves Bullseye and the drowning soldiers. She initially rejected the captain's offer to help him because she has a family now and 2 children, but she changed her mind and came just in time. James, however, refused to give up and says that nobody was leaving the island and even tries to shoot a rescue ship that belongs to the defenders, but the captain hits him with the shield and says that no one dies today. This infuriates James, who tells Cap to stop calling him son because he wasn't his son. His name is James Stark and he runs the world. He overpowers him and pins him to the ground, preparing to kill him. But out of nowhere, a powerful lightning strike hits James from the sky and he falls down on his knees. At long last, Captain America's distress call that Tyler sent out had reached its destination, and Thor, the king of Asgard, responded and came to Earth. Thor says he hasn't seen the captain in a long time and asks if they should assemble. All of a sudden, the rescue mission didn't look so hopeless anymore, now that Miss Marvel and the mighty Thor have decided to assemble and join the battle. But even though he was on the ground, barely able to stand, James refused to give up and fought back. The captain pleaded with him to give up, but things were just getting worse. Tyler says they have a big problem and they need to leave immediately. But before he could finish his sentence, 2 powerful missiles struck the prison and the whole place was engulfed in flames. James ordered the military to attack the raft and completely destroy it, but Thor was having none of it and flies straight on top of one of the planes, politely asking the pilot to exit the vehicle. The raft survivors were running for their lives, and the defenders initiated a rescue mission, trying to save as many people as they could. The captain tells James the fight is over and he flies away trying to escape, but Thor wanted to follow him. Roger asks him to let James go and focus on saving the survivors and taking them back to safety on the mainland. They bring back everyone to the defenders' headquarters where Rosa sprung into action trying to help as many people as possible. The heroes gather inside one of the rooms and Thor apologizes to Steve for abandoning him for so long. He says that he is cursed with immortality and he can no longer face those he cares about as they grow old. He's seen too many loved ones wither away, while he has no choice but to watch them suffer. Steve says he doesn't need to apologize and thanks him for coming now, when he needed him the most. In order to bring Tony Stark back to life, they need a lot of power, but the generator was already maxed out, so Thor uses his hammer to bring Stark back online. Tony says he was awake the whole time, watching his son spiraling out of control right in front of his eyes, but he couldn't do anything about it. He reveals the truth about the Red Skull, saying that he was pretending to be Jarvis's brother, the CEO of his company, and manipulating James from a young age. The Red Skull plans to seize the military and reveal himself to the world and then rule as the Red Skull. Bullseye remarks that every villain or dictator she has ever encountered all have the same thing in common. They were all men with irrational egos that wanted to be remembered in the history books. Thor asks if she is the new Hawkeye and says he senses a great warrior spirit inside of her. Luke Cage recounts everything they know so far, that the Red Skull is running the country and has access to its full military force and Tony's technology, and the public is probably going to be fine with it and attack them for fighting back. There is only one way to stop him, and the Avengers need to assemble. Meanwhile, James was working on his armor trying to improve it and make it better when he gets a visit from Jarvis. Jarvis says the Avengers made a fool of him and that his father and his friends will attempt to take their country away from them. He covers his face with paint and decides to tell James the truth. His real name is Johann Schmidt, also known as the Red Skull, and he was once the terror of Hitler. He says that Tony Stark isn't his father, but he is, and they are in this together. While the captain was up on the roof training with his shield, Tony visits him and says that his mind feels out of step and he can't remember much. He doesn't remember well what happened on H-Day and asks Cap if his wife Jan survived, but she was presumed dead with the rest. He remembers stopping the Hulk and then stopping Ultron, but the cost was too great and they lost so many. America had had enough and sent the army not just after the villains, but also after the heroes, because they didn't trust the Avengers anymore. Iron Man ran away and hid inside a motel with his wife. He had a plan, but in the end it all went south and he was nearly killed. Tony was captured by the army, but he can't remember what happened to Jan, if she was killed as well, or if she managed to escape and hide. The new Captain America holds an interview and says that the attack on the science facility was brutal, but they will make it their top priority to hunt the attackers down and bring them to justice. Several days later, the old Avengers take advantage of the fact that the new Avengers were away and dealing with a flood in Portland, and decide to break inside their mansion. The place looks pretty much unchanged aside from the paintings and decorations that were splattered everywhere. Tony wants to manually tap inside the servers and see what kind of defenses the mansion has. There wasn't much information inside the servers, but Tony did discover something unexpected. Holographic projections of the Avengers, environments, and even reporters were all fake. The new Avengers weren't even real, they were just empty holograms. Red Skull finally makes an appearance on the big screen and says the Avengers are real to the world, in order to keep everyone in line. He says he brought the Americans everything they ever wanted, prosperity through ignorance, blind eyes to the suffering of others, and they believe everything he tells them to believe. The captain realizes that this was a trap, and the door behind them closes, locking them inside. However, Thor uses his hammer to break the walls, and everyone follows him out of the mansion. Iron Man stayed behind just a bit longer connected to the servers, enough to find out the Red Skull's real plan. He has full control over the United States Army, and plans a coup to take down the president. The Skull has one final talk with James, saying it's time to take full control of the country, a country they've already been running for the past decade. He gets inside his armor suit, one that he created with help from Ultron, and says it's time to take America. Now that the cat was out of the bag and the Red Skull finally told James the truth, it was time to get busy and take over the country. James leaves to put on his suit, and the Skull has one last conversation with Ultron's consciousness. Ultron realized that Red Skull was never planning on setting him free, even after all of his help all these years. The Skull says that machines are created to serve man and not the other way around. He then powers up his suit and destroys the computer that was keeping Ultron alive. The Avengers boarded the plane and were heading for Washington, D.C. to stop the Red Skull from taking over the government. Bullseye was now the new Hawkeye and part of the team, using one of the suits to blend in better. The attack on the White House had already begun, and thousands of soldiers stormed the Pentagon and the White House simultaneously. The president was taken hostage while he claimed that the Avengers would soon come to stop them. The Red Skull enters the office and kills the soldiers, saying that he has some bad news for the president. He tells him the Avengers aren't even real and that he created them to make the people feel safer. He shows his true face, revealing himself to be the Red Skull and not Jarvis, but says that he was correct after all. The Avengers are indeed coming to save him. Iron Man flies at maximum speed towards the White House, hoping to get there in time, but he was too late and the Skull blasts a hole inside the president, instantly killing him. Tony arrives too late, but the Skull wants to pin the murder on him, saying that Iron Man was the one who killed the president. He and James have been controlling the media for years now, and pinning the murder on someone else shouldn't be that hard. The people believed everything that was being fed to them. James was getting ready inside the Avengers Tower and equipping his suit, but he wasn't alone. He created an army of drones that he alone controlled and flew towards the Capitol to help the Red Skull. A group of soldiers were preparing to storm the Capitol and threatened the people inside, but Thor arrives and shocks them using several powerful lightning bolts, saying they are not real warriors, and demands them to stop the attack. Miss Marvel enlarged her hand and knocked out several guards with a powerful punch, while the captain used his shield to deal with more soldiers. Rogers asks his fellow Avengers to try and not kill them because the soldiers were lied to fight for a false cause, thinking they are doing the right thing. While the battle was raging on the ground, Iron Man and the Red Skull were fighting their own battles, but the Skull contacts one of his generals and asks him to attack the defenders' safe houses and kill everyone on sight. He then asks him to fire the first wave of missiles towards the city, saying that in order to create a new democracy under his leadership, the city needs to be wiped off the map. Tony calls him a madman and flies away after the missiles, trying to stop them before they reach the target. Tony asks Thor for help, but he was stopped by a powerful blast from the Skull's armor. The Skull asks Thor if he has ever fought an entire country before. He remembers that the captain fought a country before, his beloved Germany, but that was a long time ago when he was a leader of men, and now he was merely leading children against a hopeless cause. The soldiers infiltrate the defenders' headquarters but find no one. Everyone had already been evacuated, and there was nobody left inside. The defenders were actually at the White House and attacked the soldiers, claiming they are here to defend the country. Meanwhile, up in the sky, Tony was destroying as many rockets as he could before they reached the city, but James was right behind him and cut off his communications with the captain. James tries to stop his father and quickly outnumbers him with his army of drones. Tony tries to talk him out of doing this, but it's too late. The Red Skull had plenty of years to brainwash him. Tony tells his son that he loves him very much, and that he loved his mother also, and that he needs to stop this attack because people's lives are at stake. The Red Skull only cares about power and about controlling people, and even though James hates him now, this fight isn't about them. There is so much more at stake. James was tired of his father's lectures and asks him to shut up, but Tony was just buying some time while he takes control over the drones. James used many of his father's designs when he built them, which left a back door for Tony to exploit. Down on the ground, Thor and Captain America both attack the Red Skull, but he overpowers both of them, claiming he is the soul of the Red Skull and the power of Ultron. This made the captain smile because they used to routinely beat Ultron if he recalls correctly, so this means nothing to them. Tony took control of the drones and used them to take down as many missiles as possible, infuriating his son who grabs him and throws him against the Washington Monument. James says he wanted to do this with minimal casualties, but now because of his father, the Red Skull will throw everything towards Washington and drop a nuclear payload. Even though James almost destroyed his father's armor, Tony was able to tell the captain about the nuclear bomb that was about to drop, and Thor flies to intercept it. Meanwhile, Luke Cage arrives on the battleground and gears up to fight, using a special prosthesis to help him move. He was still indestructible after all. While Thor flies towards the nuclear bomb, the Red Skull asks the captain why his Hero Day was called H-Day. Was it because the heroes actually stood in the way of peace? Or was it because America had the ultimate weapon? H-Day was never called that because of the heroes. It was H-Day because of the Hulk. Just like Ultron before him, the Red Skull found a way to control the Hulk and deployed him to Washington, planning to use him to destroy the city and kill the Avengers. Hulk is enraged and begins to attack the White House, destroying everything in his path while the people were trying to get out of his way and stay alive. Hulk is the Red Skull's ultimate weapon, the most destructive being in all of human history. Captain America tried to talk to him, but he didn't respond and just continued to smash things in his path. Thor attacks him and claims his fight is with him, while Rogers asks him to take Hulk far away from people so he doesn't hurt anyone. But Hulk wasn't the only threat. They still had to deal with the bombs being dropped on them from the sky. Meanwhile, Tony tries to talk to his son and make him understand that he isn't on the right side, but he says he doesn't even know him and is doing the right thing, even though some people need to die in order for others to understand. But something was wrong. The ring on his finger belonged to his mother, and it started to emit some kind of strange energy. That's when Tony remembered what happened to his wife. After H-Day, Tony and his wife decided to keep Jane inside the ring and hide her from the world until the moment was right, so she could help her son save the world. That moment had finally arrived, and Janet escapes from the ring just in time to catch one of the bombs that was about to drop on them. The heroes were shocked that Janet was still alive, but the Red Skull wasn't too happy about it and instantly attacks her. She is injured and falls to the ground, reverting back to her human size, while Tony runs towards her. While this was going on, Thor was fighting the enraged Hulk, jumping from Washington, D.C. all the way to West Virginia. Thor tried to talk to him, but there was no use and the fight continued, jumping from West Virginia to Texas and then to New Mexico. Thor begs Banner to calm down and regain control over the Hulk because he was destroying entire cities and killing hundreds of people, but he could not be reasoned with and begged Thor to kill him. Back in Washington, D.C., James couldn't believe that his mother was still alive, and he was thrilled about it. Red Skull tells Captain America that he can track Hulk moving at incredible speeds, leaving destruction all across the country. He says that Thor is no match for him just like Rogers is no match for him. On top of the White House, Red Skull grabs the flag and stabs Rogers with it, saying that by the time he's done, people will wave it as a sign of fascism instead of democracy. Soon enough, the people will see his lies as truth because he controls the media, and he killed the president because Americans don't need one when they have him as Führer. Rogers responds and tells the Red Skull to smile because what he just said was being recorded and transmitted live all across the country. Tony attacks him and takes him high into the air, but he managed to free himself, even though it wasn't for long. Ms. Marvel grabs the Red Skull in her hand, while Hawkeye and the Wasp attack simultaneously, managing to damage his suit, which caused an explosion. The blast was so powerful that it sent him flying back into the roof of the White House. Even though Captain America was badly injured, he grabs his shield and says the story ends here for him, and then slams it into the Skull's suit, cutting his body in two. But the fight put too much strain on the Captain's body, and he began to have chest pains. He was having a heart attack. As if this wasn't bad enough, the Red Skull activated a self-destruct inside his suit, and James quickly grabbed him and flew away, far enough to protect everyone from the blast. While Jane attempts to resuscitate the captain, Tony caught his son from behind and asked him to leave the Red Skull's body for himself, saying the journey had just begun for him as the new Iron Man. Over in Los Angeles, the Hulk was out of control, raging and leveling entire neighborhoods, so Thor was forced to take him into the ocean. The Wasp managed to bring Captain America back, and Tony took the Red Skull directly into space, while Thor and Hulk were both sinking to the ocean's floor. The Skull's body exploded, creating a powerful explosion that destroyed him and everything that was left of Tony Stark. On the ocean's floor, Thor placed his hammer on top of Hulk, leaving him to drown and eventually die. 2 weeks later, the world was getting back to normal, and the Red Skull was exposed for the villain that he always was. Steve Rogers was back with Rosa, and the super soldier serum was downgraded to the just keeping him alive serum. James Stark was working on rebuilding the Avengers mansion, his way of atoning for his sins. Thor comes and says he needs to return back to Asgard because a king's work is never done, but he feels sorry for killing Banner, even though it was his time to go. He was wrong for leaving Earth after H-Day, and vows to always return if his friends ever need him again. Thor returns to Asgard, and wants to be alone, telling his guards not to disturb him, but someone dared. His brother Loki says he was the one who made sure Thor got the message when Captain America asked for help. After all these years, Loki grew very fond of Thor, and knew he would enjoy this adventure, helping others and avenging. Meanwhile, inside the Heaven of Warriors, also known as Valhalla, Tony Stark is surprised to find Bruce Banner there. He thinks Thor was behind this, that two of the world's brightest scientists ended up in the afterlife together, but Banner says that everyone keeps laughing at him for trying to order non-alcoholic drinks. Back on Earth, Hawkeye and Ms. Marvel visit James Stark while he was working on rebuilding the Avengers mansion and offer to help him, saying that together they can build it stronger and better.